Yay, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to dive into your story because I know that it is going to be amazing. We've talked a little bit, obviously. I've been on your marketing team for, has it been a year now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I
Hmm.
know a little bit of your journey, so I know it's going to be amazing.
I'm
My whole
excited.
with these spotlight interviews is to share the ups, the downs, the good times, the tough times, the lessons, the tips, the tools, all the things that have helped you build your thriving photography business and join the top 1% of photographers in our industry, creating a six-figure income or more. And I know you've blown most photographers out of the water with your income, reaching multiple six figures. So I'm excited to dive into how you built it, kind of what your best secrets are, and really help inspire other photographers who are trying to build their business and really just giving them tips that can help them, jump ahead and really get to where they're thriving in their photography business. So just to start off, let's just hop in, introduce yourself, where you're located, any tidbits about you.
So I'm Karina Velez, and my studio is in the Windy City, Chicago. I love, I have a love and hate with being in Chicago. I hate the taxes, but I do love, there's so much beauty and richness, and it's a hub. So we get clients that'll fly in to see us. They're like, well, I've always wanted to go to Chicago. So they kind of, it's like an excuse to go. So it's kind of like it has that good and the bad of it, but you know, it's been great even though.
Kind of tell me, how did you get into photography? Do you remember the first time you picked up a camera? Was it like love at first sight? Was it, kind of tell me about it?
I was never the girl who would take pictures of everything. I mean, I took a class like for like dark room and stuff like that just because it was I had to do an elective, and I was like, oh, this sounds kind of cool. And I think I wanted to do it because I saw like a movie or something where they showed it, and I was like, oh, that looks like a fun thing to do. So I did that, but I still didn't even like it didn't even hit me like, oh, this is what I would be doing, or this is what I want to do. And it just kind of started with, to make the long story short, was I wanted to open my own like online fashion jewelry store. I mean, we had vendors, we had all our suppliers, we had made boxes, logos, we had our website, we even had an 800 number for customer service. I mean, everything was almost done except we wanted, at the last minute, I was like, well, we had even purchased inventory at this point. And we said, oh, I was telling my husband, I'm like, man, I really would like to show how some of the pieces look on. We were like, okay. So then we started taking photos that were very centered on the jewelry. So I had to learn about photographing people and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden people were like, oh, you're a photographer? And I'm like, no, I'm just taking pictures for my store, blah, blah, blah. And people were like, oh, you're good. And I was like, and then I had one client who, interestingly enough, is my makeup artist for 7 years now, wanted me to do an engagement shoot of her and her still husband, her fiance. And I did the photo session, and I remember my husband is very honest with me, and I'm very honest with him, and I think that's why we work so well. And my husband's at home, and he's just like, oh my God, if she sucks, I'm gonna have to tell her. Like, so he's like all worried. And I'm just kind of like, man, I know my husband, he's gonna want to put it on the big flat screen and he's gonna rip my work apart. Like, because I know he'd be honest with me and tell me, like, don't pursue this.
Yeah.
So I remember we get home and he's like, all right, let's put it on. And I'm like, my heart's fluttering. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I sincerely felt like I was going to throw up. And then suddenly, like, when he's looking at the photos, he's like, babe, I could see your amateur mistakes, but you really have an eye for this. And you should really pursue it. And then I was like, what? Like, he's like, no, you really should pursue this. And so then we were like, well, it's going to take us this much to sell jewelry and a photography session. I could do this much. And at the time, of course, you don't know your cost of doing business, your cost of goods. So I was like, how much am I going to charge for a session? $75, for 1 hour. And then you realize that hour turns into more because now you have to edit and all the, everything you have to deal with. And so of course I learned that if I wanted to have a photography studio that was profitable, that wasn't going to work. And at the time I had a full-time job, so it was just like on my spare time, just kind of getting into the whole business side.
Right.
So that's kind of like where it was born,
I
the
love it.
desire to like pursue photography.
I love it. I think everybody's story is unique, but also somewhat similar.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, I've talked to quite a few people who they were working full time. They found that they wanted to go full time in photography. Tell me a little bit about the transition. How long did that take? Kind of what did that look like for you between full time and starting a business?
So I actually started the photography studio. I actually worked for 2 years full time, my job and my studio. I got a studio fairly quick though, because I actually ended up lucking out. I would say I found next to my corporate job, there was this other small building and they were renting offices upstairs for $250, everything included.
Wow.
So I was like, that's a no-brainer. And at the time when I got the studio, I was already making like 500 extra per month.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, hey, cool, I'm making enough to pay for half of it, and then the other half, whatever I wanted to invest it back. So I started with this small office, but it was right next to my job. So my hair and makeup artist had keys. She'd open the door for the client, get their hair and makeup, and during lunch I'd go to the studio, do a session, and go back to my job.
Wow.
Yeah. Because
That
it was
is
that
amazing.
close.
So, okay, so it took you 2 years. And then, like, what was the pivotal moment of you're like, okay, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do this full time?
This one's an even more interesting story. I honestly felt like I should have quit, but I was really scared to take the leap. And I feel like life sometimes has a way to like force your hand to reach your destiny, because my department got split up, and the boss that I had, he was amazing. Within 10 months he had promoted me, so I was already reaching a new level. When the department got split, I ended up being under this manager who was awful. Like, she was awful. And then she actually tried to get me fired. And it wasn't even my fault. I had all the proof. This is insane. I'm like, maybe this is the sign. I just need to go full time. But I was scared. I was genuinely scared to go full time photography. Well, long story short, one day I get asked to be in a meeting, and then I get to this meeting, and then I see that HR is in the meeting, and I'm like, I'm getting fired. I was like, oh my God, I'm about to get fired. So then I get there, and then they just gave me this paperwork. They said that I hadn't supposedly been performing and all this bunch of stuff. And I just stood quiet, and I was like, okay, I'm not signing that. And she's like, well, you can put refuse to sign. I'm like, I'm not touching it. You'll be hearing from an attorney and we'll talk later. So of course HR is trying to mitigate, sends my boss out of the room. And then I was like, no, it's the weekend. I'm gonna leave and we'll chat on Monday. And I refused to speak to her. So then I spoke to my husband. I'm like, hey, and he's like, don't let them fire you. Just put your 2 weeks in. They had said that if I didn't raise my performance within 30 days, I'd be let go. But of course, in the process, I talked to an attorney, like, this is what's going on. And I printed like a stack of proof that she had a vendetta against me. And so they're like, well, we have a lawsuit. If you want to pursue it, they're most likely going to want to settle. So come Monday, I already had an email from HR. Hey, good morning, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you're scared right now. You know what I mean? So I said, yeah, I'm ready to chat. Walked over there, literally put a folder on HR's desk. And I was just like, well, this is what she's saying. And this is all the proof that I have that this is personal. So yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's when,
it sounds like if you weren't performing, they wouldn't have kept you on for 5 years. So
yeah,
I think,
it's so crazy.
yeah.
7 years.
Yeah,
But
so 7 years. So you
yeah.
ended up just putting in your notice and then deciding to
Well,
go.
I didn't get to, this is how I'm saying, like, that life has this way of putting you right into your destiny, because HR realized that I had a big case. So basically, they gave me a contract that if I didn't pursue a lawsuit, I can leave the company with 1 year pay, 1 year of benefits, um, health, medical, eyesight, the whole nine, and that if I wanted to come back to the company, I could. I just had to wait a 3 year period.
Hmm.
So even, and that if anybody were to call, if I wanted to work at another job, that they wouldn't say that they wouldn't rehire me and stuff like that. All of that was in there. So I took it, but I didn't tell her at the time. I went back and I told my husband, this is what they're offering. So I'm going to tell the attorney. He's like, just take it. Like, what the heck? Like, that's way better. So then the attorney was like, you know what? He's like, I think that's a fair deal. If you want to pursue it, we can. It's just going to be long and drawn out. And I was like, no, I'm good with that. I get to go work on my business full time with my salary. Like, that was a gift. You
That's
know what I mean? Like, it was a gift. So yeah, that's kind of how I got pushed into it, but in a good way, you know?
yeah, for sure. What would you say is the biggest struggle that you feel like you faced when going full time in your business?
Mindset. I feel like photographers sometimes like feel like that's a cliche thing, like, oh, mindset, oh my gosh. Because we never want to admit that we have tough times whenever we're gonna try something new. Even after I've already done certain things. Like this year, we decided we were going to add a collection that was like $8,000.
Mhm.
And I wanted to puke. Even though I had sold collections, I had sold, like, I had my highest collection was like 5,000. And people had bought above that because they wanted wall art, they wanted this, they wanted that. And people have already purchased it, but yet for whatever reason, putting that on paper was like, oh, I don't know, that's just gonna freak people out. And I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm like, I'm gonna put it there, and if it doesn't sell, it doesn't sell. But it's gonna be there. You know what I mean? Like, and it's so crazy when then somebody's like, oh my God, I have to have it all. And then they just do it, and then it just makes you be like, yeah, except this time I don't fight myself as hard when I first started. Like, I would let fear paralyzed me when it came to IPS, especially. Like, that was my biggest thing. And I had a photographer friend that was local here, and she did high school seniors. And
Mhm.
she's like, Karina, you're so good. Like, you could be making so much money. She's like, and she would show me that she was making $2,500 sales, $3,000 sales. And I'm like, if people don't pay me $200, they're never gonna pay me that. How many times have you heard photographers say that? Laugh.
I can't even count.
You had $1 for every person that said that, right?
Oh man,
But
I'd be a multimillionaire.
yeah, mindset is definitely the one. And just when you think you have stuff figured out, like, I feel like mindset is a continuous
Oh,
thing you have to nurture.
for sure. I think that's probably one of outside of business, like not even just in life, that's one of the biggest lessons I think is in keys is you never stop growing, you never stop learning, you never
Right.
stop being better. If that makes
Right.
sense. Like that's the
Yeah.
entire journey of life. You don't reach
Hmm.
just some destination and then you're like, oh, I'm all done. It's like
Exactly.
the moment you hit, I think I've heard it this way before, the moment you hit that peak that you've been hitting for, you look out over and you see the next peak. There's just
Right.
a whole another level, a whole new world that you hadn't been able to see yet because you hadn't
Right.
reached that first peak. And
Right.
yeah, I love that. Yeah.
It's
And
amazing. I feel like if people like actually dealt with their mindset, they'd make so much money faster, because it's only your fear talking to you and telling you you can't, you're incapable. I grew up in an abusive household, so for me it was like you're stupid, you're worthless, and all these things. And then so like when you that's been ingrained in you, you kind of like think like, yeah, I know I'm a go-getter because I always was, but sometimes I would hear those words and feel like I'm not worth that. Why would people pay me that? Or my work is not worth that. And you kind of just start giving yourself permission to not do better. You know what I'm saying? Instead of giving yourself permission to say, I want more. I want more for my life. I don't want the life that my parents had or my siblings have or whoever has. I want to create my own way. And if I can just get past this hurdle of fear, like it's gonna be beautiful out there. And that's how I feel. Like my husband always tells me, he makes fun of me because my husband says like, you're so freaking fearless, it's crazy, but you see a little spider and you're like squirming all over the place. So I just joke with him, I was like, well, I can't be good and fearless at everything, like, you know. And so we just kind of laugh about it. But it's, I haven't felt like I have been 100% fearless in the whole process, but I think my husband sees from where I came from and how far I've come, that he's like, most people would cower out and not do it. Like, and here you're doing it. You know what I mean? So having a support system too is really important. And if it's not like your immediate family that supports you, find someone else that does. A friend, just somebody that can really just be like, you got this, you can do it, and just lift you in those moments where you're just like, I don't know that I could do this.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that. You touched a little bit on having kind of a rough upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel like, and well, you're welcome to kind of share with that if you want to share a little bit, because I think it's important for people to see like that there are people who come from certain circumstances and they persevere and they succeed and are successful. But what do you feel like was the big difference in you not listening to those words? Or was there a book that you read, a person in your life, like something that you found, or a mentor or a person or a friend or another parent? Like what was the catalyst for you not to basically stay in that type of environment believing the words that you heard?
I think for me, I would have to say is like, just watching TV sometimes, like, and seeing how celebrities live their life and hearing their underdog stories. And like, I was always drawn to that stuff. And I know one of the things that I was drawn to so much was like Tyler Perry's story, because Tyler Perry was, and I remember his story just spoke to me. He did a play for 8 years straight and nobody came, and it was like the worst thing. And you know, Tyler Perry's spiritual and stuff, and he was saying, he said that he told God the last year, you know, God, you keep telling me to do these plays and I'm sick of it. I'm always broke and I make no money and all this stuff. And this is the last year. I'm not going to do it after this. And he said that that play, like the line was out the door and people couldn't even get in. And he's just like, he learned that perseverance was important. And even when people would tell him, it's just give up on that already, it's always a loss anyway, he just had this love and passion for it. And sometimes people say, oh, having a passion for it, that's another thing people say, cliche. But I feel like when you truly love something, or you truly have a desire to make something happen for yourself, like that deep desire, that burning desire that's inside of you is what's going to keep you going. Because you're like, this doesn't even make sense to me. I remember telling my husband this, like, sometimes I'm like, I'm done with this, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And then I'm like, what am I saying? I'm sticking to this, like, because I know, like, deep down inside something doesn't let me quit. You know what I mean? And I know I have a fight in me. I've always had it. And I know, don't, maybe it's all those the circumstances I went through, like, you know, I guess I should say trigger warning for anyone that's gonna watch this, but like for me, you know, I grew up in an abusive household where there was pedophilia, there was like abusive as far as beatings. I mean, I grew up in Chicago. I think everybody knows Chicago's gangster town over here. Chicago, we live in the worst neighborhoods. We had to, when we'd walk outside, like we had to like duck on the floor because there were shootings. And as a kid, that's what I grew up in.
Mhm.
And I always used to say, you know, how do other races do it? You know, how come so and so they're like making they're they're not living this kind of life, you
Mhm.
know? And my father specifically was like, don't ever go to school. School will never pay your bills. And he was like, don't open up a business. Like he was so against progress, which was whatever. He was in his own thing. But and I was always like, yeah, but how did so and so do it? And then I think that's what started gravitating me to hearing people's underdog stories.
Mhm.
And I started searching. I remember buying this book of a bunch of different like celebrities who were sharing their underdog stories. And I wish I could remember the title of it because I can't remember for the life of me. I've talked to my husband about it throughout the years, and I'm like, why can't I find this book? Like I remember that's when I first heard Tyler Perry's story, and but there was so many people in there, and they were just talking about all the hardships and the things they went through to get to where they were. So I learned that perseverance was like going to be the key to like being successful. Sometimes people want they'll go into Facebook groups and say, man, so and so is making $3,000, $4,000 averages. Like I want to get that. And then they're frustrated sometimes because they're not getting it. I mean, it's just IPS. If you implement it properly and listen to the stuff in this group, you can get there quicker than some of us did. But I feel like sometimes people get frustrated that they don't have clients, like constant clients. Like I've built my business for so long, and that came with perseverance and longevity, that I have clients that have been following me from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. I had a client that told me, I've been following you since you started. It's been 9 years.
And she
And she
justified.
finally came. You know, it took her 9 years to make the decision. Now everybody's not like that, so I don't want people to get discouraged, but that it's that marketing that starts stacking, you know what I mean, from the people who book on impulse, and then the people who've been following you. It just all starts stacking, and then you've got a really solid business built, you know, repeat business or whatever. But that comes with longevity, perseverance, you know.
So it's more of a kind of a slow growth, and you have to have the perseverance.
Yeah.
And I think it's just probably a common human nature because we live
Yeah.
in such an instantaneous gratification world.
Right.
And they're like, well, I want that. And social media makes it look like people jumped from here to here
Oh,
overnight, and you
100%.
and you talk to them. And I think this is great, and I don't want this to be discouraging for anybody watching this,
Right.
because it's totally worth the journey. But there's a journey, and I'm almost going to say there's a toll to be paid,
Right.
because I think that the only reason you are where you are now is because of the things that you went through, the hardships that you learned from and became better. Like, we lost everything in 2008, like went from $1 million to like hundreds of $1,000s in debt. But and it was painful. Like,
Yeah,
if you've
I
ever
can
gone
imagine.
through that, lost everything, when
Yeah.
you're go from a pretty good lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
to you don't even know how you're going to pay your rent, that
Right.
it's dramatic, I guess you could say. But
Yeah.
I would never go back and choose to change that because of the lessons we learned, the contrast that we got, because it's propelled us to where we are now. um, so I think that embracing these moments and these things that you're learning about is part of getting to that higher level, or to that next level, like you were saying.
Yeah. I think the key too is, you know, investing in education a
Mm.
lot faster. I wish there was stuff like this when I started, because there
Right.
really wasn't. And then when I bumped into education for some of them, like, it was missing a lot of elements, and you just really didn't know. And I had to learn so much through trial and error, which will cost you so much more. And
Mhm.
so sometimes I hear photographers saying, yeah, but that's too expensive, or I'm not going to buy this because that's too expensive. But then they will go and buy like a new lens. I remember this photographer was saying that, like, about another educator or whatever, like, oh, it's just so expensive and all that. And then the next week she posts about her purchasing 3 lens.
Mhm.
And I was like, three, like, not even just one, three. And glass is expensive.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here like, that glass is not gonna make you money,
Mm.
and she even posted like, oh, I got these 3 lens, who wants to, get photos. And I'm just like, because you got a lens? Like, that's just not how it works. But you just see it all the time. Again, it's just a mindset. Even I've heard at some of the expos for photographers where you see it, all the business classes have way less students, and all the art classes are like just overblown, and people get so focused on being an artist that they forget that they shouldn't be a starving artist. Isn't that how you say it?
Well, there's a difference too when you transition a little bit. You can be an artist
Right.
and a hobbyist, if you will, but when you transition into wanting to make profit from your art, you have to become a business owner first,
Yeah.
um, and an artist second, in my opinion, in the sense of you have to have all your ducks in a row, all your processes in place. You have to understand your numbers in order to have profit.
Systems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
systems and processes for sure. Um, you said something that piqued my interest or like had me think of something and I can't remember what it was. Oh, I think maybe it's just like addressing. I think we've actually, Damon and I have actually talked about this a lot because I totally agree with you. There's
Mhm.
just not a lot of understanding. I think it's just most photographers who decide to have a business don't come from any sort of business background. And so they don't understand the power of education in the sense of like a mentorship or hiring a business coach or getting education on the business side. And I think in their mind, if I had to guess, is like, if I can get a lens and take better pictures, I could make more money. Like for them, the investment in a lens is a very clear purchase and result. Whereas
Mhm.
investing in education, since it's so outside of their like wheelhouse or knowledge, is I'm going to invest this, but I have no idea if I can get anything back. So
Yeah.
it's just there's more of a certainty for them, although it's a false certainty because we know we've been there, we've seen it, like we know what the what the end result is.
Mhm.
But I also think too that might be part of the journey and the toll that has to be paid is for them to experience investing in it and then going, oh well, I thought this was going to happen. And it's not happening. So
Right.
obviously I'm still missing a piece. And so I think there's kind of a journey for everyone. But I mean, I will say that this is probably like the third, fourth, fifth interview I've done that everybody has said that's one of my questions is what was the one thing that you wish you had knew when you started your photography business? And
Yeah.
pretty much everyone said to invest in education, the business side of things, getting a mentor, getting the processes and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. For sure. 100%. I think social media has helped to show people, like, hey, there are courses and things out there. But when I first started, it wasn't so. Now there's more, but it wasn't so obvious. So yeah, I had to learn the hard way.
Well, and
And
it was
then, to be honest, you want to know what sounds crazy? I actually ended up buying some courses because I was like, oh, maybe this is I'm what I'm missing. And then I just realized that what was in the course was stuff I was already doing. I was just like thinking, maybe because I had to learn it the hard way, I just thought that maybe I was missing something, and then it turns out I wasn't.
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So what do you like, were there any like what was the turning point, I guess, for you? I know you hired like it was not a non-niche, I should say, like a business coach.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I mean more of like a broad span, like a business coach, not just a photography business coach. That was a
Yeah.
big investment for you.
Oh yeah.
What kind of led to that? What made you take that leap, and kind of what do you feel like that did for you?
So for me, I felt like I had told you, like I had purchased a course and I started seeing like that everything I was doing everything I needed to do, but I just didn't feel like I was really performing at my optimal, if that makes sense.
Your full
And
potential.
so yeah, so I was just like, something is missing, and I feel like I want to know how I can really grow this business and what do I need to do. And so I decided to look at a performance coach, more of someone who was just going to like evaluate me, like, because sometimes we like to say, oh, this didn't work for me, or this is not this or that, or like just kind of put excuses when it's really that you either procrastinated, you didn't implement the system as it was told to implement, because photographers are notorious for that one. Like they want to skip around and then be like, hey, this is not working for me, and then you go check and you're like, you kind of skip these steps, and you know what I mean, and then you're like, well, it's not going to work if you just do it
Yeah.
the way you think it's going to work. Like it's defined or outlined for a reason, right? So I was like, I don't want somebody who's in the industry, especially because when I started to like reach levels,
Mhm.
it starts dwindling. um who can help your business move, who can help you move the needle, you know what I mean? There's and I think you know this, there's a lot of photographers, there's educators out there who just they'll help you like how to break six figures. But then what happens when you break six figures? Who's saying I'm going to help you break to 250? Who's saying once you reach 250 I'm going to help you break 500? Who's saying once you hit 500, if you want to hit a million? And there's people that are like, no, I'm good with 500, I'm good with 250. But I feel like people who start passing that 300 mark, they're more overachievers, and they're like, no, I want to hit 500 and I want to go for the mill. And like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like people who are in that, and we know it's like that 1%, like they're the ones that are going to want to hit that. Because there's photographers who are like, no, I don't, I just want to make a good living. And that's fine. Like, that's what you want, more power to you. But I feel like there's like a lack in the industry for that space. Like, who's helping photographers move the needle once they reach that level? Like, how do you go further? Like, what do you do? Do you advertise more? Do you do this? What do you do? And so then I decided to go see a performance coach. And he's amazing. And and it was very expensive. It was a lot of zeros. And I was like, okay, like I'm really gonna do this, but I know that he was proven. And I was like, you know what? Here goes nothing. And I did that in 2015. And then 2016, my business blew up. Like, and it was all because he looked into me and he's like, this is what you're doing. This is what you're doing. This is how it is. And I thought I had a thriving business because I was already hitting six figures. I thought I had a thriving business, and they looked into my company and were like, if you don't do this, you'll be out of a business. You'll be out of business by a year. And I was like, and it was hard. I literally cried when I saw it because I thought I was being successful. And it wasn't until I saw it, and like, you can't unsee it. And I'm a numbers person, so you can't unsee it. And then once I saw that, I was like, I felt like oh, I'm a failure and all this stuff. And they're like, I know it's a lot. Take it in. Okay, this is if you don't do X, Y, and Z, and we're gonna lay it out for you. And it was just more of just really watching my numbers and what was happening. And I was kind of stuck in this cycle of that I know a lot of photographers do. Hey, let's do this one strategy that's gonna bring us 80 clients at once. So now you do this one strategy, typically low session fee stuff, right? You book all those clients and then you just stop marketing for the rest of the time. And then before you know it, you don't have clients anymore for the next whatever months. And then you're just like, what am I going to do? I need to do another sale for really low, you know, and you just kind of get stuck in this vicious cycle of like having to offer your work for so low session fees, and then you get cancellations and you deal with all this mess. And so I knew I was stuck in that cycle. Then I was like, I'm making money, but I'm not making money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it just took me really starting to see like how I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. And I still do sales, but it's not.
It's
But I'm
calculated.
still, yeah, I'm still marketing every month, and one side feeds the other kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, you know, like I'm not just stuck in this crazy cycle. But it was nice to have an outside person just like look at it as a business person, not as a photography business person.
Yeah.
And like, you know, but I feel like with you and Damon, I could honestly say like hands down,